Caroline Duffy is one of Britain's most respected and popular poets, writing for both adults and children. Her poetry collections include The World's Wife and Rapture. Her work is taught on the syllabus for both GCSE and A-level, and earlier this year she was appointed the first female poet laureate. Around the same time, Duffy agreed to be filmed for the South Bank show.
Rosa d'autunno, rosa colorata, rosa sciupata, rosa malta.
Well, where I am now is in Orta, in Italy, and I come here a lot anyway. Both I and my daughter love to come. We have friends here. But every late autumn, they have a beautiful little poetry festival, probably the tiniest but most perfectly formed poetry festival in the world. I think poets love to travel and go to festivals. It's probably the most enriching and exciting part of the life of contemporary poets. Not a red rose or a satin heart. I give you an onion. It is a moon wrapped in brown paper. It promises light, like the careful undressing of love. Here, it will blind you with tears, like a lover. It will make your reflection a wobbling photo of grief. I'm trying to be truthful, not a cute card or a kissogram. I give you an onion. Its fierce kiss will stay on your lips, possessive and faithful as we are, for as long as we are. Take it. Its platinum loops shrink to a wedding ring, if you like. Lethal. Its scent will cling to your fingers, cling to your knife.
You've talked, I've read, talking about the language you use. You try to make complicated things simple. And there's a poem, Valentine, where the Valentine is not a satin heart, it's not a rose, it's an onion. Mm. And I like that poem very much indeed. Can you tell us how you approach that with that view in mind, that this is going to be expressed simply?
I think love poems are difficult because so much has already been said, and the love poem can drift into the pop lyric or the greetings card. So for me, it's the most challenging kind of poem to write. I was thinking of something that was truthful to the experience of love, which is as filled with tears as it is light. And the onion suggested itself very simply as an image for that. And I just wrote the poem imagining unlayering or peeling the onion and what it might reveal about love.
What, for you, is the value of poetry?
I think to me poetry is like having a companion. That's something I've always felt since I was a child, that it's to be not lonely. The sense of language as poetry is like a presence, even when one isn't writing it or thinking about it. Even to read another poet's poetry, it's being accompanied, which might sound fanciful or nuts, but it is how I feel, that I'm never alone. It's August and I'm in Edinburgh at the Edinburgh International Book Festival, and it's a place I come to every year. I love Edinburgh. I mean, outside Venice, Edinburgh is my favourite city in the world. I just think it's staggeringly beautiful. Every street that you look down, the lights, the grace of the architecture. So it's a privilege to come. Some days, although we cannot pray, a prayer utters itself. So a woman will lift her head from the sieve of her hand and stare at the minims sung by a tree, a sudden gift. Some nights, although we are faithless, the truth enters our hearts, that small familiar pain. Then a man will stand stock still, hearing his youth in the distant Latin chanting of a train.
Prayer, you use the sonnet form. Now, what attracts you to that form?
Well, I think for poetry, sonnets are prayers. They share a lot. They're both small. You know, a sonnet should only be 14 lines. They're easy to learn by heart, as prayer is. And sonnets are often about things that matter to us as human beings, falling in love or bereavement. They're like, on another level, the TARDIS. They're bigger on the inside. They contain whole universes. So they're magic. They're like spelled.
So why were they good for this subject, prayer? Why was the sonnet form good for that?
Because, for me, a sonnet is like a prayer. And the poem itself is discussing the absence of faith, is looking with regret to not being able to pray. Pray for us now. Grade 1 piano scales console the lodger looking out across a Midlands town. Then dusk, and someone calls a child's name as though they named their loss. Darkness outside. Inside, the radio's prayer. Rockall, Malin, Dogger, Finisterre.
Do you feel there's any sort of tension in your work between very contemporary material and using extremely traditional forms? I mean, the quatrains in Education for Leisure, for instance.
I find using a particular form, be it, you know, this verse will have 7 lines as a kind of arbitrary framing of the language, results in more pressure on the language for me. I have to make more ruthless decisions within the poem. The whole dynamic changes if I impose restrictions on a poem rather than just allow the line to go where it will and follow the line. So very often in my work I will, once I have the heart of the idea or the poem pulsing, I will find a form to put that in. So it is a working against, as you say.
Well, that's what seems to happen quite a bit in your work. There's a sort of push in the subject matter and a hold inside the form of the verse.
Yes. Well, if we go back to Magritte, his paintings, which are deeply disturbing, or Max Ernst, but they're framed in gorgeous gold frames, just as, you know, Rembrandt would have been framed.
Today I'm going to kill something. Anything. I've had enough of being ignored, and today I'm going to play God. It is an ordinary day. A sort of grey with boredom stirring in the streets. I squash a fly against the window with my thumb. We did that at school. Shakespeare. It was in another language, and now the fly is in another language. I breathe out talent on the glass to write my name. I am a genius. I could be anything at all with half the chance, but today I'm going to change the world. Something's world. The cat avoids me. The cat knows I'm a genius and has hidden itself. I pour the goldfish down the bog. I pull the chain. I see that it is good. Budgie is panicking. Once a fortnight, I walk the 2 miles into town for signing on. They don't appreciate my autograph. There's nothing left to kill. I dial the radio and tell the man he's talking to a superstar. He cuts me off. I get our bread knife and go out. The pavements glitter suddenly. I touch your arm.
You use dramatic monologues.
I don't write so many dramatic monologues now. That was very much how I wrote in the first couple of books that I wrote. And again, I associate it very much with the Thatcher years, all these unrepresented voices and sort of political turmoil and homelessness and unemployment. I found that I was writing in different voices, but less so now.
And from a class point of view, that was down there rather than up there. Warming her pearls is a good example of that, isn't it?
I wouldn't have had the pearls, would I? I would have been a servant. And
But the poem is essentially about this devoted, loving servant.
it's about desire, isn't it? She desires her mistress.
Yeah.
Sort of anticipates the work of Sarah Waters by 20 years, that poem, I think. But no, that came out of a little story. I had a friend who was very interested in the history of jewellery, and she was telling me that this did happen in Victorian times, that the servant would be asked to warm the pearls because the heat of the body improves the lustre of the pearl. Didn't I think this was outrageous that servants were treated in this way, but I found the whole thing immediately erotic, and just that phrase, warming her pearls, sexy.
Oh, I thought you warmed them to get them literally warm. If you warm them because when you warm the pearls, they glow a bit. Oh, I see. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Don't do that with your pearls, then.
No, I don't. No. I tend to put them in my back pocket and sit on them.
Next to my own skin. Her pearls. My mistress bids me wear them, warm them, until evening when I'll brush her hair. At 6 I place them round her cool white throat. All day I think of her, resting in the yellow room, contemplating silk or taffeta. Which gown tonight? She fans herself whilst I work willingly, my slow heat entering each pearl. Slack on my neck, her rope. She's beautiful. I dream about her in my attic bed. Picture her dancing with tall men, puzzled by my faint, persistent scent beneath her French perfume, her milky stones. I dust her shoulders with a rabbit's foot, watch the soft blush seep through her skin like an indolent sigh. In her looking glass, my red lips part as though I want to speak. Full moon. Her carriage brings her home. I see her every movement in my head. Undressing, taking off her jewels, her slim hand reaching for the case, slipping naked into bed, the way she always does. And I lie here, awake, knowing the pearls are cooling even now in the room where my mistress sleeps. All night I feel their absence, and I burn.